Hello, I'm making this video about the Starfire fusion grenade build because I've watched a lot of them and a lot of them kind of just tell people what to use. They don't actually tell them where this build is kind of successful and what kind of advantages and disadvantages it has. However, if you're just wanting an answer, I'll put like a thing on the screen or something that tells you where to go to if you just want to know like what to equip and you don't feel like, getting into the intricacies of like how to, I guess, effectively apply it at places and like what places it would tend to lose out at. That aside, I'm gonna just pull up my build here, and my stats are wretched, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna move past it. So starting off, we're gonna look at the loadout here. The loadout is pretty self-explanatory. Wither Horde, and this is because it has a synergy with Starfire Protocol, and I'll get into that in a moment. For the weapon I use like an SMG that's got demolitionist on it, and this should be abundantly obvious. If it's not, it'll be explained momentarily. Frenzy is obviously a good pick here, so this is just what I use. I use it's Unforgiven. A lot of people use it in IQ-less SMG or, even Risk Runner, or whatever they feel like using. I'm a Risk Runner fan, so I use that whenever I'm not using Wither Horde. And ideally use a solar heavy weapon. I use this Cataclysmic, just your average, 4 times the charm and bait and switch roll. There's nothing too crazy going on here, and this is for another synergistic reason. As far as the subclass goes, it's pretty obvious. Empowering Rift is absolutely imperative, and this is because, again, synergy with Starfire Protocol. Burst Glide, it's that's just it doesn't matter here. This isn't Destiny 1, your jump doesn't give you different stats. I prefer to use Celestial Fire, however, a lot of people like Incineration Snap, so I think that this comes down to preference. However, Celestial Fire does have a little bit longer of a cooldown, so if you find yourself meleeing a lot, and I will cover what you're thinking right now in a moment, then I guess you could use Snap. However, I prefer Celestial Fire because it lets you hit targets at a little bit further of a range, and also you're not going to use it too often anyways. So we get to our first actual cornerstone of the build, and that's Fusion Grenades. Fusion Grenades, normally on their own, do an okay amount of damage, like a decent amount, but they lose out to Solar Grenades in terms of raw damage output. However, the cooldown on Solar Grenades is longer. And that gives us a lot of different options here. A lot of people have been using Healing Grenades with Solar 3.0 since the current content like duality and all that is quite damaging. However, you're going to have to resist this under the context of, hey, things are going to be a lot better if you can kill them faster. Looking at incendiaries, thermites, trip mines, scatters, and firebolts, they're all cool options, but none of them really synergize as well as fusion grenades in terms of damage output. So now's a good time to segue over to Scorch and Ignition and how these mechanic works. Every time you damage someone with an elemental effect, not like, Firefly or just solar weapon damage, but something like Celestial Fire, or Fusion Grenades, or Solar Grenades, they gain Scorch stats. When you hit a certain amount of Scorch stats, you ignite, as you can see on the left here. Ignition is a huge explosion that does a lot of damage to the target, and it's just like a free grenade hit. That moves me on to the aspects. The aspects are the most important part of this, at least Touch of Flame. When you have Touch of Flame, you can see that it buffs your grenades and gives you 2 fragment slots. What's really important here is that it makes the fusion grenade explode twice, which is coincidentally, I'm pretty sure, enough to make most targets in the game actually ignite. So you can imagine where this starts to get a lot of synergy, and it starts to, put out a lot of damage really fast. I prefer Icarus Dash because I like to move fast. For the fragments, I'm preferring to use the following, and I will talk about why I'm not using a specific one in a moment. I like to use Singeing because class ability, recharge when you Scorch. Sometimes maybe you botch something, and this can just make it really nice. Ember of Ashes is pretty self-explanatory. You apply more Scorch stacks, therefore applying more Ignition and creating more damage. Solace is also self-explanatory, especially for this season. I think in a future season where classy restoration doesn't exist very much, or doesn't exist at all, or restoration doesn't exist as heavily, that you would probably replace this with something that gives you, you know, something like char or something of equal value that would probably give you more ignition effects like the Ember of Eruption. And I prefer char as well because it spreads scorch to affected targets, thus creating the secondary effect where you're getting more and more and more ignitions. A good use case of this looks kind of like Caretaker, where if there's a lot of ads, specifically like solo, duo, and trio Caretaker, where there's a bunch of little aliens running around and you're just throwing grenades. And these grenades can hit the ads, and the ads can then, they themselves can detonate and ignite and just do a bunch of extra damage for free without needing Into the Light or anything like that. So now let's address the glaring problem. Besides, why aren't you using Ember of Torches? Well, if we take a look at the current changes to how empowering stacking works, your Radiant is about a 10% damage increase to weapons only. So that means whenever you throw your Celestial Fire, or your Incinerator Snap, and it hits a target, you would get Radiant for about 10 seconds. Prior to a recent update, this would stack pretty heavily with things like High Energy Fire, Mantle Battle Harmonies effect, and Empowering Rifts. And so you could get a crazy amount of damage, and this actually equated out to more damage buff than Well of Radiance. So it was better to not use your Well of Radiance, but rather it was better to use your Radiant melee, and by proxy having like Empowering melee, or Empowering finish, and having all these things in 1-2 finisher, so that you could continuously spam it and throw down Empowering Rifts. And this had a huge synergy, and it actually led to Dawnblade Warlocks having like just this extreme amounts of consistent high damage output that made Well of Radiance objectively useless in terms of giving a damage buff. However, the damage resist and the survivability of Well of Radiance still carries a lot of weight in that. Anyway, I'm gonna move past this. I feel that Torches loses its value since the stacking of Radiant no longer works how it did before, and it was an unintentional interaction anyways, so this doesn't bother me very much. With the subclass information out of the way, I'm going to talk about what my armor looks like, what my stat build looks like, and what the mods that I'm using look like, specifically the combat style mods. As far as the stats goes, you get a little bit of freedom, but I would suggest having 100 resilience and at least 100 discipline. I say at least like you're supposed to have more than 100, but I digress. So the reason why you want 100 resilience right now is because in Season of the Haunted, as you can see, you get a flat 40% damage reduction. As far as I understand, and I'm not 100% certain, this actually grants more than Protective Light used to, or does, or something like that. Right now I believe this is 10%. And the stacks, like the duration you get increases with the amount of chargeable light stacks that you have. So that's pretty insane right now. This may or may not be nerfed at some point in the future, and you may be watching this video right now, and this could be nerfed. I don't really know though, I'm gonna be honest. Discipline is pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes you mess up, sometimes you're not gonna be able to get like the consistent Wither Horde ticks off or whatever. And this just makes it a little bit more consistent. I would argue you don't even need to have 100 discipline. You could even get away with something like 60 or 70, just due to the synergy. And you could actually throw some in terms of recovery, again, just in case you mess up the synergy and the actual gameplay loop of the Starfire build. This provides me the opportunity to go ahead and explain how Starfire Protocol actually works under the hood. So as you know, it says you gain an extra Fusion Grenade charge. On Fusion Grenade kills, you get your Rift back, and getting damage while empowered gives you grenade energy. So let's talk about this. Empowered means you're either in a Well of Radiance or in an Empowering Rift, nothing else. It is 20% grenade energy per weapon hit. However, this has a 0.4 second cooldown or 400 milliseconds or just under half a second. Obviously with this information it means that you need to get 5 hits in order to get your grenade back, so that's about 2 seconds. The good synergy here with this is that means you can kind of sync this up pretty cleanly with how Wither Horde's auto-loading holster works if you have the catalyst. I believe that's the catalyst that does that. Auto-loading holster takes 2.5 or 2.5 seconds to activate. So what you can do is you can throw 2 grenades and be relatively confident that your auto-loading holster will have reloaded your Wither Horde and alternate between sticking the boss and shooting the floor. You could even do this every 4 grenades so that you conserve ammo. And I'll show this in a Gowron clip later on. But that's just how this works, and I just wanted to kind of give an explanation on that. Moving on to the helmet, something that's really nice to use is Ashes to Assets, since you're going to be throwing a lot of grenades, like a literal fuckload of grenades. And that's just something I like to use. It gives you your super and enables you to have some degree of synergy. Like, let's say if you need to make special ammo, you now have special finisher almost always guaranteed. You're guaranteed gonna have it just with a couple grenade kills. I just throw a mod in here and I try to sock at this. I want to go ahead and make a brief segue over to Artifice Armor. You don't need it at all, but it does help out a lot, and it makes it so that you kind of get a little bit more flexibility with what you can get. Because sometimes you can, use this Artifice slot and use a beneficial mod that you may not have been able to use in your build. So I would consider getting some Artifice Armor if you don't have any. Especially if you like to do PvE. Master Keitel is very easy, and she has the same amount of health that she does in Master, however you deal less damage. But it should still be a pretty consistent one phase even post Storm Chaser nerf. So my build is Bountiful Wells. I like to use Bountiful Wells because, it's self-explanatory. You get a free extra well whenever you generate one. Second up, I like to use Elemental Charge. Now, there's something to consider about Elemental Charge, and I'm going to cover that in a moment. Normally, you'd use Elemental Charge in combination with a High Energy Fire, typically, or some other charge with Light Mod. I don't think that this is necessarily good in this build, because you don't use High Energy Fire. And the reason for that is you have an unlimited uptime on your Empowering Rift, which is the exact same benefit as High Energy Fire. However, it leaves you a little bit more anchored. I'll come back to this. On the chest piece, I'm using Font of Might. This is because you're going to be making a lot of wells, since you, in theory, have literally unlimited grenades, and yeah. Moving on to that, we've got Elemental Ordnance, which is your well-making mod. Not a lot going on here, you just get kills with grenades. It's worth mentioning that alternatively, you could actually use the Solar mod. I believe it's Explosive Wellmaker, and this actually... this is a bad explanation of how this mod works, but you can see it says rapidly defeating combatants with explosive damage spawns a solar elemental well. This is pretty poorly explained because it's a generous statement. It could even be like this extends to things like a Wither Horde impact could create a well. So you could use this in place of something like Elemental Ordnance to give it a little bit more generosity. However, I prefer Elemental Ordnance just because I like to keep it clean. I should have done a little bit more testing and data gathering before recording this, but I don't really care, honestly. Yeah, you can test it out for yourself. They cost the exact same energy, and as you can see, there's no like elemental energy used here, so do your own testing if you want to try that out. And finally, the class item this season is pretty heavily relegated to two mods that are seasonal. And that's going to be Classy Restoration, so that you can rift drop off of ledges and theoretically be an unkillable nuclear bomb throwing machine, and Solar Fulmination. Solar Fulmination is objectively the most important component of this. What Solar Fulmination does is just makes your ignition stronger. They have more damage, and they have a bigger radius, right? As you can read in the mod. This is super important because it means that your grenades, when they ignite, the targets that you're throwing them at, a good example is like Gowron, or perhaps you've run out of ammo in a solo Keitel and you need to clutch up, or perhaps any other circumstance like Caretaker. Maybe you suck at shooting at roll, so you like to throw grenades. Perhaps you're doing Atrax 1 and you don't have Parasite, things of that nature. This just gives it a little bit extra damage and makes it nice and consistent. Again, Classy Restoration is self-explanatory. As far as rebuilding this on a future season, I would heavily recommend something like 1-2 Finisher, Snapload Finisher, or Special Finisher, one of the three finisher mods that you have here. Snapload is like obviously good because it reloads you, and maybe you just you don't have the downtime to reload your weapons, or you don't have auto-loading holster. Granted, you're using Wither Horde, and that's like the general cornerstone of your thing, so you really don't need that. 1-2 Finisher is really nice for something like Radiant Stacking, however it lost a lot of value since Radiant Stacking doesn't work anymore. Special Finisher, I argue, is the best for Famine content. Famine's a modifier in your Strikes, Grandmasters, stuff like that. I don't think it's active in Grandmasters anymore, where enemies drop a lot less ammo. And so you may find yourself in a situation where, oh no, I don't have Wither Horde to DPS the boss. Well, you could finish something. It's not like your Well of Radiance is going to be off cooldown for a long time, because you're going to be getting grenade kills anyways, with Ashes to Assets twice. So you'll get your Well of Radiance in whatever this takes back. And as far as this goes, your empty mod socket, I think that you could throw something like Seeking Wells in here, or even perhaps High Energy Fire, just to have that extra little bit of damage uptime for permanence. Something else is Supercharged, which gives you, what is it, 4 Charge with Light charges that you can hold. So just things to consider, or even, you know, a general little stat mod here if you want. So, now that I talked about all this, what would I socket here in place of Elemental Charge? I think that personally, I would socket for this the remainder of this season, probably something like Seeking Wells, so I don't have to step out of my Empowering Rift to go and grab Wells. Seeking Wells works within 20 meters, so if you're a little bit curious of that, 20 meters is a decent amount of distance. However, it's not a super far distance, so if you're throwing nades across Narnia, obviously the Wells aren't going to seek to you. And this just makes it a little bit nice and consistent. As far as the other mods go, outside of combat style, obviously I talked about Ashes to Assets, but I prefer Fastball, even though I'm notoriously like not a Fastball gamer, for the sole purpose of it just makes your grenades go straighter, and you can kind of, you know, yeet them. Let's say that you need to get a Rift reset now. A good example of this is at Keitel, where you throw down your Rift for Classy Restoration, and you stick her with Witherhoard, and you're doing DPS, bam, bam, bam. Well, let's say maybe you need to, like, drop your Rift really fast soon. Well, okay. Or maybe you don't have your Rift off cooldown. Well, what you can do is you can throw a grenade at one of those Scions that are sniping you on the platforms and get your Rift back so that you have Classy Restoration or Empowering Rift or Healing Rift even. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use Healing Rift with Starfire Protocol, but the point remains. You throw that grenade, and you're more likely to hit that because it's going to go in a more straighter trajectory. As far as these go, momentum transfer is not really my kind of thing, but it used to be good. There's a lot of different mods you could build around this. Impact Induction wouldn't be too awful either. You could also throw a loader in here for an event where you don't have Unstoppable Glaives and like Glaive of Dreams and stuff like that. Obviously, Glaive of Dreams is absolutely cranked. I was doing Galron stuff, testing and seeing if I could get like a 1 cycle going on Warlock with the grenade build, which I got about 65% health, but I digress. In a future season, I would probably prefer to use something like a SMG reloader or something like that if I don't have demolitionist, or even linear fusion loader or sniper loader or whatever loader you have that you don't get auto loading or demolitionist on. But for now, I'm just using these. And again, you can see that Artify socket's coming in really nice here so that I can have both of these and still get Fastball. Going towards the chest piece, I just prefer to use the seasonal resist mods and an arc resist mod, so I get like a nice trifecta of resist. Sometimes you could socket 1 or 2 of these out, so like you could have a melee and arc, or arc and, you know, Armor of the Dying Star, or arc and melee. To give you an example of this, sorry if I'm speaking a little bit quickly here, I don't want to lose my voice or anything like that. In the solo Flawless Master at Gauntlet, I found myself absolutely needing to just drop Armor of the Dying Star and going for a setup like this. Maybe even double, but double's not very good. And so the reason for this is because they all shoot you with the Acreus, and obviously you're not taking much damage from the snipers in Gauntlet. Like, it's just not happening. Like, they hit you twice maybe. But in that event, I think sniper damage resistance might even be better. But I digress. Just something to consider, that you get a lot of flexibility with how these approach, but I prefer just to use one of the seasonal resist mods, and then just like the resist mod that's not covered. Hopefully Bungie keeps following the trend with giving us 2 different elemental resists, because I really like this and it feels like nice. Secondly, you could use something like an unflinching if you feel like you're getting flinched off a lot. However, I don't think this is necessary, and I think that the chest slot loses a lot of value in terms of like what you get. And this is due to the fact where in most encounters you're going to be rallying the flag, so you may be considering using a reserve mod. However, you would just have like a chest piece switch with reserves on it that you would just, you know, switch to, and then rally the flag, and then you could switch back and you would have that ammo still. It's worth noting that of course you're not going to get the Artify socket with an exotic, unless Bungie changes something in the next season. As far as the boots go, you get a lot of flexibility with this as well, because you can see I use Linear Fusion Scavenger and I use Machine Gun Holster, but this is absolutely unnecessary, and you could use something like whatever you really wanted, like 2 Scavengers. Let's say that you have like a good stat build, you could get rid of this and then, you know, find yourself using another Scavenger mod, which I could actually do this right now, but I digress. And again, the class item, we talked about that, and that should be the build for the most part. I think that if you're watching this video and you've watched this section of the video, you understand well enough how to kind of build your armor and mods and stuff like that. And if you don't, it's very simple. if you would like to go and maybe experiment a little bit with combat style builds and stuff like that, you can just go and look at this page and see what mods you have, and just kind of think about what you would like to try out, and, you know, alternate and stuff like that. There's a lot you can work with, and I mean, yeah. I want to make a quick side note here, actually, because I recall seeing Vendetta do it at one point when we were doing Grandmasters. He would run, I believe it was Energy Converter, with this kind of build to get a lot of wells over and over and over and over again. And I think he also did this so that he could use Special Finisher very comfortably. So that's something to consider. And I believe that, you know, consisted of the build that I have, but with Supercharged Energy Converter. So that may be something to consider. So I want to demonstrate a couple little spots where this build would be effective and ineffective. So right immediately, here you're going to see I'm taking on Gauntlet, the first boss of the Duality Dungeon, the one that came out with Season of the Haunted. And it's just going to be two very low effort DPS phases. Here immediately you can see I just dropped the rift through grenades and did everything I could to spam my rifts and grenades and keep them back. And again, a simple thing, I don't really have to worry too much about how I spend my utility because I'm just going to get it back anyways. Of course, you know, in a real thing I'd be using like a machine gun or something, but whatever. So here, I'm going to get pushed out quite a bit by him, just some super unfortunate, like, here, just launching me out. And I'm just throwing grenades and sticking him with the Wither Horde. About every 2 grenades, 2.5 grenades, give or take, I'm going to go ahead and switch and either restick or shoot the floor underneath him with my sword out so that my Wither Horde gets its auto-loading. And as you can see, I'm doing some like quite strong damage here. I'm going to drop my Empowering Rift so that I get Classy Restoration, also keep getting the benefit of my Starfire Protocol active. And right when we got 5 seconds left, I'm just going to head out, and that's going to be the end of that DPS. Setting up for the second DPS phase, I'm just going to drop my Rift immediately, shoot and stick, throw the grenade, and I'm going to get like a 5-piece with that. And then as you can see, I have my grenade and my Rift back, and I can just take my sweet time here. Again, I'm doing double DPS phase. I like the 2 dunks instead of grabbing 2 flags at the same time so that I get the extended phase. And again, you can see it's very low effort. I'm not sprinting around or anything. This is all the same clear. The cut just went from, all did was skip the interim. And like, I'm not even doing anything super optimally. I'm not, you know, sword skating around. Just gonna stick him, drop my well, start throwing grenades, switch to the sword, maybe try to get some sword slashers in for the extra DPS. Like I said, if you were doing this in like a, you know, your first ever solo flawless attempt, or you wanted to be a little bit more optimal, you'd either be on Titan, or you'd just be using a machine gun. Typically, if you look at all my videos, I've got like a commemoration, that is the Deepstone Crypt machine gun that I like to use here. But all I'm doing is sticking with Wither Horde, throwing grenades, and heavy attacking, maybe a couple light attacks every time it comes off cooldown, heavy attack rather, and that's it. And you can see it's not necessarily the most comfortable 2-phase, but it is a 2-phase. I cut it a little bit close here because I was being edgy. And something to mention here is I never would run into this ammo situation in a real like encounter where I was trying to do this properly, because I would just switch my class item to Special Finisher, go finish one of the guys outside, and still would have my well back. And as you can see, right as the DPS phase ends, my well's about to come off cooldown, and that's just from spamming grenades. And so now to show an example of a case where this may not be so effective is something like solo acquisition or duo or trio acquisition. The efficacy of your ability to run this build and maximize its potential runs quite low in this kind of challenge or this kind of situation due to how often you're moving around. There's never a situation where you're just anchored down, throwing nades, shooting Wither Horde, right? As you can see, I've got like transversive steps on, I've got the Eager Sword, I've got Dead Messenger, I'm killing a lot of guys, doing a lot of back and forth. And again, this is solo acquisition, but the point remains if you are running around. However, if you're in a team and you're doing like a 6-man or like whatever, something like that, 6 Jardian, then you could easily make great use of it if you were just the guy who was camping the obelisk. Because in that scenario, you would just be sat down, you're anchored to the obelisk, so you can, on the contrary, you would maximize your efficacy and ability to output damage and effectively utilize this kind of playstyle. And that's something to keep in mind. The context is very important. However, it is just one of those things that you kind of got to think about, like, oh, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? And a little bit of common sense goes a very long way. A final example I'm going to give is just like a flat-out boss DPS melt. where the boss does not have a strong crit multiplier. Something along the lines of nothing, right? Or perhaps caretaker. So you can see I'm going to switch off Ophidian or whatever, Transversus Steps, go straight to the Starfire, and I'm just into a boss melt here. And I'm just sticking the boss with the grenade, sticking with the Wither Horde. And then this is it, like, there's not much to say. This is like the ideal circumstance in my opinion, where you're just doing fat deeps to the boss. There's not a lot to say, and I just wanted to once again demonstrate where this like would be the most effective scenario. And again, it comes down to that kind of you know, understand what you're doing and use some common sense, right? That kind of ordeal, and you'll have the best luck. This video was about 20 minutes longer than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be 5 minutes, but then like the lack of detail bothered me, so I made it 20 minutes longer. Either way, hopefully this kind of opened up your brainium to how the Starfire protocol synergistic style build works, and that's kind of all I have to say for this one, boys. If you like it, like the video, subscribe, all that stuff, show it to your friends who maybe suck butt at the game. If this video gets a lot of views, or like it performs well on average compared to the channel, then I'll do more of them. I'll do like the Titan Shield Bash builds, and Hammer Bro, and you know, all kinds of other stuff. But until then, I appreciate everyone for watching, and I'm going to catch you guys later.